So the goal of communists and being involved in class struggle is twofold. We want to help the class to win as many gains as possible, and we want to win more workers to communism. So communists work with broader struggles. As the Communist Manifesto said, we don't set ourselves apart and criticize from the sidelines. Communists distinguish themselves from other workers only in that we understand the line of march and the direction of the struggle, and we always raise in every struggle the interest of the whole working class. That means the international working class. We want to make struggles as effective as possible, and that means we give critical support. We give criticism of ineffective strategies and violations of working class solidarity. But we also usually give unconditional support, which means that we don't say a particular struggle has to adopt a certain line before we support it. But even if we, but at the same time, we also are critical if they don't support good politics. Obviously, if a struggle is too flawed, we're not going to support it. So this is an overall approach that Marxists have taken since the Communist Manifesto. The particular application of this approach, however, will vary. And the United Front is one example of this overall approach. In the early, during World War I, the communists broke with the socialists because the Social Democratic Party, socialist parties, etc., became nationalist rather than internationalist. They supported their own governments in war. And therefore, Lenin and the other Bolsheviks saw the need to split and form an actual communist international, which was against war, against bourgeois politics, against imperialism. So this is what happened with the formation of the Communist International in 1919. However, after that period, in the early 20s, it was no longer a revolutionary period in Europe and a lot of other places. So the communist parties and the Communist International saw that capitalism had restabilized, and they needed to unite with other workers for defensive struggles to defend the interests of workers against wage cuts and layoffs and so forth. They hoped that these joint struggles would then move from defense to offense. Many countries at this time had very large communist parties and socialist or social democratic parties. So it's really unlike the situation today. So what was the United Front tactic? Well, the United Front tactic was that the communist parties would publicly call on the socialist parties or social democratic parties, their leadership, to unite and struggle for the defense of working class interests on immediate demands. Each side would still have freedom of propaganda, including the right to criticize their allies. It was not a question of communists and socialists combining their politics into one program. It was instead a tactical approach where if they both agreed on fighting for wage increases, they would work together on that issue. The slogan was "March separately, strike together." So what was the rationale for this? Well, there were two possible effects of this United Front approach. On the one hand, if the Socialist Party leaders accepted it, or even if they didn't, it would spur struggle. That is, it would get more social democratic workers to unite with the communists in common struggle around particular demands. So it would increase the level of class struggle. And that was obviously something that communists always want to do. However, on the other hand, if the Socialist Party leaders did not accept it, then what would happen is that they would be exposed as not really being supporters of the interests of the working class. Therefore, this would help to win workers away from social democracy to communism. So there were several successes by using this approach. Now, some of these successes actually came before the official proclamation of the United Front approach. The first one was Kornilov in 1917. In 1917, before the Bolsheviks took power, there was a provisional government in Russia, which was primarily made up of reformist socialist parties, like the Socialist Revolutionaries. They were still committed to imperialism. They were still committed to war, etc. But there were also, it was a situation of what was known as dual power. So the working class had Soviets or workers' councils all throughout Russia, which had a degree of power as well and could check the government. So this was very aggravating to the capitalists. And a right wing of the capitalists, especially led by a general called Kornilov, decided that the whole revolution needed to be smashed. That meant smashing the Soviets, but also smashing the provisional government. So Kornilov led his army in a march towards Petrograd, which is the main center of the revolution in Russia and also the capital city. The Bolsheviks formed a revolutionary defense committee along with members of other political parties with the goal of stopping Kornilov. And what they did is they were able to win over the rank and file of the army through propaganda, and they were able to win the railroad workers to stop the transport of troops and so forth. As a result of this united front effort led by the Bolsheviks, but combined with other parties, they were able to defeat the Kornilov coup. And 2 months later, they were able to act, they had gained so much prestige from this that they were able to lead the workers to take power in October 1917. A similar thing happened in Germany in 1920. There was a government which is known as the Weimar Republic, which was led by, again, reformist socialist parties, the Independent Socialists and the Social Democratic Party. There were workers were organizing. They had formed on a low level some Soviets and so forth. So again, the right wing in Germany decided that the whole movement of the working class needed to be smashed. So a general named Kapp organized what was known as the Kapp Putsch and tried to overthrow the government and smash the working class movement. As a result of that, the trade unions, the Social Democratic parties, and the communist parties came together to form what was effectively a united front to stop the Kapp Putsch, and it was successful. The government was saved. It was still the Weimar government, but because of this, the Communist Party was in the position in 1923 to lead a socialist revolution. This revolution did not succeed, and that's a whole other story which we can get into. But in any case, it stopped the Kapp Putsch. Following that, the German Communist Party put forward, under the leadership of Paul Levy, put forward the idea of the open letter. And this was an open letter to the Social Democratic Party and parties in Germany saying, let's unite to fight for the interests of the working class. Here are some key demands that we should unite around. This resulted in increased, although it was not really taken up by the Social Democratic parties, it resulted in increased struggle and also more workers being won to the Communist Party. So these are three very successful examples of the use of the United Front tactic. Germany in the late 20s and early 30s, Trotsky, Leon Trotsky, leader of the Russian Revolution, proposed, who was now in exile, proposed to the Communist Party that they should adopt this United Front approach to stop fascism. However, the Communist Party in Germany at this point, by like say 1928, 1929, had been taken over by supporters of Stalin and had adopted an ultra-left position. Instead of fighting for an alliance of Communist Party and Socialist Party workers against the fascists, they denounced the Social Democratic Party as just the same as the fascists. They called them social fascists, which was a creative new concept from the Stalinists. They also called the conservative governments that existed in Germany fascist. So this is very similar to what some people on the left do with Trump today. Then there was an example where in Prussia, which was one of the main states in Germany, had a social democratic government. The Nazis put forward a referendum which was trying to oust that government through electoral means. So this is a Nazi initiative. The Communist Party decided it was going to unite with the Nazis against the Social Democrats, and it went along with this. They renamed the fascist referendum against the Social Democrats the Red Referendum. It didn't work, but they were willing to make an alliance with the Nazis and not with the Social Democrats against the Nazis. They put forward the idea of the United Front from below, which meant that they would go to Social Democratic workers saying, we need a united front, but we're only willing to struggle with you together and unite with you if you first of all reject your leaders. So basically, they had it backwards. Instead of winning workers in struggle and showing them that they had the best strategies and tactics, they issued ultimatums and said to the Social Democratic workers, if you don't break with your leaders, we're not willing to work with you. The result, of course, was that Hitler, the German working class, was divided. Hitler took power, smashed the unions, wiped out the Communist Party and the Social Democratic Party, which apparently was not social fascist because the fascists eliminated it. And of course, the concentration camps, the genocide, et cetera, et cetera. So as a result of this, the Communist International, which was now run by Stalin and Stalinist politics, began to shift towards a popular front approach. So instead of rejecting any alliance with anybody, an ultra-left way, they wanted to ally with everyone who said they were opposed to Hitler, and that including allying with bourgeois forces, the so-called democratic bourgeoisie. So instead of marching separately and maintaining clear politics to win people in struggle, they amalgamated all their politics together. Instead of fighting unity, they wanted programmatic unity with the socialists and the other bourgeois forces in a government coalition. So the communist parties would be part of this coalition, which didn't have its politics, but they would defend it as the only way to stop fascism. So this subordinated the communists to become a left cover for bourgeois governments. This discredited the communists and it divided the working class. In the US, the Communist Party from 1936 on began to support Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Between 1934 and 1936, there was a bit of a sweet spot for the Communist Party in the US because it was rejecting the early ultra-left position and moving towards the Popular Front position. So as they moved in this trajectory, they stopped for a little while. They rested around the United Front approach by accident. And when they did this, they helped to lead the general strike in San Francisco, for example. So they had a good position for a couple of years. Then they adopted this Popular Front approach. And this resulted in the Communist Party in the US abandoning Marxism, saying that communism, this is a slogan they had, communism is 20th century Americanism. The Communist Party abandoned the rank and file orientation, supported the labor bureaucracy, supported imperialism during World War II, and downplayed, during that period, downplayed the struggle against racism, calling off a march on Washington, etc. The Communist Party in World War II, in order to help the US win the war, they adopted the no strike pledge. That is, they helped the bureaucracy suppress strikes during the war. This in turn laid the basis for McCarthyism, because after the war, the militant workers were less inclined to defend the Communist Party against the attacks from the government from under McCarthyism, because those communists had betrayed them during the war with the no strike pledge. In France, the Communist Party joined the Popular Front government in 1936. It was a more left-wing government that had existed before, but over time it adapted to the capitalist class and didn't meet the workers' needs. The Communist Party stayed in the government, the Popular Front government, even while it attacked the working class. The new government began to move to the right and suppress struggle even more, and this opened the way for the Nazi takeover. Another example of Popular Frontism was Chile, 1970 to 1973. In 1970, Salvador Allende was elected as a member of the Socialist Party. Part of this coalition, the Popular Unity Coalition, included the Communist Party and also bourgeois parties, small bourgeois parties like the radical, so-called radical party. So as a result of that, this coalition was seen by workers as their government. And so they began to strike and organize. Peasants started to take over land, et cetera, et cetera. However, the government itself stood against those things and told workers to give back the factories, to give back the land, to obey the government. They even brought military officers into the cabinet of Salvador Allende. This divided and confused the working class movement to the point where by 1973, the military felt strong enough that it could overthrow the government. And so you had the military coup of September 11th, 1973, with Augusto Pinochet taking over, killing a whole bunch of workers, driving people into exile, et cetera. So in summary, the United Front had limited success where it was applied. The Popular Front virtually everywhere resulted in disaster. So the lessons for today are that we should embrace the class struggle spirit of the United Front for unity of workers around progressive demands while maintaining our clear Marxist politics. So the concept of critical but unconditional support is very important. We need to reject class collaborationism, the approach of the Popular Front, that is being uncritical of a trade union bureaucracy, which we need to remember is a middle class element, not a working class element, and reject incorporation of movements into the Democratic Party. We need to follow the long-term Marxist strategy of unity and action with critical support of all positive movements. Now, there are a lot of differences between today and the 1920s and 1930s. There are no mass left parties, especially in the United States. So we're not in a position to call out the reformist leaders of major working class institutions for rejecting our proposal for a united front. We can't pretend that we can have a full united front like Trotsky proposed in the 1930s. However, we can apply the same spirit to coalition work, unity in action, critical in politics. We need to build revolutionary organization by clear propaganda and joint action and struggle. We need to show in practice that our strategies are more effective. We need to reject the Popular Front approach today. Today, that means no even critical support to the Democratic Party. If we did that, as some people on the left, who we all know who they are, do that, that would just be melding of so-called socialist politics in with bourgeois politics. We need to intervene in struggles for the interests of workers. In summary, as Marx put it in the Communist Manifesto, the communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at the communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win.